Good evening, everybody. It's a beautiful evening actually in northern Kentucky. Wow, cool. Sort of a little blast of winter came back today, but it's been a beautiful time the last few days, and you wouldn't think there was such ugliness out there in the world right now with all that's happened economically and with what's going on with coronavirus and all that whole situation. So I can see that I can now follow you on here, and we're going to give you a behind-the-scenes look at things tonight. So I'll just wait until more people get their notification and get on here and let us know where you're from as you're watching us here. And also, if you have any questions, we're going to meet someone tonight, an artist. And if you have any questions, you can certainly ask them on here, and we'll do our best to answer them. So tonight, you know, we can't have you come and visit the Creation Museum right now or the Ark Encounter because they're both closed to the public, but we can bring them to you. And that's what we're doing. We're doing a series of behind-the-scenes programs where we actually bring the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter to you, but we do it in a different sort of way. We give you some behind-the-scenes information, background information that you wouldn't get in any other way, and that enables you to have a lot more detail before you even come. That'll help you in your visit. So we're at the entrance to the main exhibits. We're going to go through and meet one of the artists in the Biblical Authority Room. It's going to give us some fascinating information. Again, just some of the detail, what goes behind the exhibits in the research section. And this is a beautiful video that shows here on this curved screen. And it really helps set up the whole foundation of God's Word and man's Word, and two different worldviews, because we have two different foundations. And people sit here and watch that. It's sort of like a pre-show, if you like, leading into the starting points room. And it really gives people a really good overview that there's a battle between two religions, two worldviews, two foundations, God's Word, man's Word. It's a battle that began back in the book of Genesis, when God told Adam to obey his word, and the devil said to Eve, "Did God really say you don't need to believe God's word?"
The only planet in the universe known to support life.
So we're not going to watch that tonight. I just wanted to tempt you with it. So do you want to come back here to the Creation Museum and watch it? So we're going to go around to the Biblical Authority Room, and we're going to meet Greg tonight. Have him there. We have a skeleton staff of designers right now as we, sort of scale down operations until we reopen. So Greg,
yes,
great to have you here. And what is your position at Answers in Genesis?
I'm an exhibit artist.
An exhibit artist. You are meeting a real exhibit artist.
Yes.
And, if you know what artists are like, they're sort of, they're artisty.
Yeah.
Yeah, artisty. All right. So we're going to come into the Biblical Authority Room, and you're going to give us a bit of background behind what went into this. Even the floor is sort of special, isn't it?
Yeah. We made these so that every area represents a time in history, kind of as we go from basically the time of Abraham forward. And so this here area is like the ancient Sumerians, because Abraham, he came out of Ur of the Chaldees, and that's where the nation of Sumer was at that time. And so this architecture and artistry and the floors and everything are made to kind of reflect that culture.
And so, even the idols up there?
Yeah, these would be like votive offerings. So what they would do, and what they think they would do with them, is that these would represent worshipers, and they would take them and they would put them in a shrine, so that when the person went elsewhere and lived their life, they believed that their prayers would be answered, because they had a basically an advocate, a representation of themselves in the presence of the God. And so these represent actually worshipers instead of gods, and they would be put in shrines. And so it's just, again, representing kind of where Abraham, he came out of a pagan culture, And then he went into several pagan cultures, and the Israelites had to live through that. And that's what this area represents as we go through just history.
So when people come, a lot of people just walk in here and say, wow, this is spectacular. But if you actually stop and look at it, you'll see the architecture changes, the style changes.
Yes.
So we leave with Abraham as he leaves his home, right? And we step into where?
We are coming into, and so this would be still basically the time of Abraham, so you're coming into Egypt. So because we know that Abraham, he came, went to Canaan, and then he went down to Egypt. So this is another culture that he actually engaged with too. So this would be Egypt, and we still have a lot of architecture in Egypt that we can, look at and realize that it's like they painted things beautifully. They carved like tombs and stuff out of solid rock, and so that's what this floor also represents, and this wall here represents their tomb architecture, and so they believe that like this wall here represents a false door, where they believe that this is how they could communicate with the person that had died, and they could leave offerings for them, and that they could come back and forth through a stone door like this.
So that's amazing. So these aren't just pretty colors you paint on here. There's a lot of research going into this. And actually, the way it's all designed is based on real archaeology, archaeological finds.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
So we come out of there, and what do we have here?
So this is still Egypt, but we're moving on in time. So we have on this up here a representation of a pharaoh. This pharaoh happens to be Mentuhotep II, and he might have been a pharaoh that his lifetime overlapped either with Abraham or with one of the patriarchs like Isaac or Jacob in Egypt. We just don't know for sure which one, because there are many of these pharaohs. But he was a significant pharaoh at the time, kind of united Egypt again. And so this represents kind of what all pharaohs kind of thought of themselves as. They were God on earth, and so here again we have like Joseph coming down to Egypt, and we will talk about him a little bit in his area, and then Israelites coming down here again, and they are again immersed in that Egyptian culture for a very long time.
It's interesting. God calls out Abraham to call out a people, and they have to struggle through all of these pagan cultures.
Yes.
All leading up to the birth of Christ, right?
Yes.
And all the struggles that they went through.
Yep.
And it's a reminder, on this earth we struggle.
We do.
In a pagan culture.
Yeah.
Just before we go to the next section, somebody said here, will children 10 and under still get in free this year since you've had to be closed? And the answer is yes. That's our commitment. Children 10 and under are free this year. And really pray that we'll be able to open again soon. Somebody made an interesting comment here. We need to reopen the churches and close the abortion clinics.
Yeah.
I mean, you stand back and look at this culture. The governments in the various states, most states, not all, but in a lot of the states in the USA are supporting keeping open the abortion clinics to kill children every day.
Right, yeah.
And yet the churches are closed.
Right.
Think of that. I mean, churches are using all sorts of other means electronically, like we are, to reach people. People can't come to the Creation Museum, so we're bringing it to them, right? And they're getting guided tours from people like Greg, who know know all the material behind the scenes here. So you know what I think we should do? We should put on my Facebook the corona deaths for the day, coronavirus deaths for the day, and the number of children killed in abortion clinics each day. Let's compare those and look at that. People are so concerned about people dying from the coronavirus, and don't get me wrong, don't misquote me. I'm not saying that just to ignore that. I mean, it's a terrible thing, but yet, how many children a day in the United States? I mean, it is thousands a week that are being killed by abortion. It's just mind-blowing. Anyway, Greg, let's go on to the next section here. So now we come, to the time of Joseph. So Abraham into Canaan, into Egypt, and now where are we?
So now what we wanted to show here is kind of a transition. So Joseph, he started out in the area of Canaan. He actually started out in the area of more what we would call Syria today. an Aramean family up there where Abraham had come down from and where his family had stayed once they come out of Ur. And Jacob had gone back there, and that's where Joseph was born. And then he came down to Canaan, and then from there he was sold into Egypt. And so we wanted to represent here kind of the culture of him, what it would have been like in Canaan, which is not as grand as in Egypt before he went down there, but you still had like shrines that were dedicated to Egyptian gods. And so like here, this is the representation of the goddess Hathor. She was the cow goddess. Later on in Israelite history, she would be kind of the one that would be associated with the golden calf and stuff. And so, but the shrines for Hathor were all over Canaan at that time. And then obviously when Joseph went down to Egypt, he then encountered, a lot more different gods that he, in that culture. And then, he had to be faithful to the God of Israel.
It must have been fun. I can't imagine living in such pagan cultures. Just think, 8 people survived on an ark, and then they gave rise to all these people, but they totally rebelled, and what a mess.
Yep.
By the way, as we look at these, we have these special video portraits. We're going to get one of our AV team to go through here and explain for one of these behind-the-scenes tours Thursday. Okay. At the design studio on Thursday, we're going to explain how these video portraits are done. For instance, Rahab over here, that's my favorite of all the ones in here, because we have Joseph here, and there's Rahab. If you look very carefully, you can actually see her hair moving, you'll see her eyes blink, and, they look like portraits. This is real video, actually, and the sets are in the warehouse, and some of the sets are still there.
Yep.
So we're going to show you how these were filmed. They're absolutely incredible what they've done here. But anyway, so we have Joseph, and then we move to
This is
Jericho,
Rahab.
right?
So yes, and so it's still, so Joseph and the Israelites went down to Egypt, and then they came back, and they came back to a pagan culture, where they had to come in and destroy the land, and Jericho here represents that first moment of them entering the land. And so it's a very similar architecture, kind of smaller scale, but again, lots of different gods and goddesses. And Rahab, she's an example to us all of someone that's in a pagan culture, and yet she turns to God because she hears of his mighty works.
It's interesting, and that seems to be the same Rahab that's in the lineage leading to Jesus that we have there in the Bible.
Yeah.
Hey, you're an artist, Greg. How'd you get all this information?
It's just, I just
you guys
love it
really
all.
research it carefully, don't you? Research all the
yes.
history behind it.
Spend a lot of time researching.
So that's what we want people to understand. They just didn't paint pretty pictures. What are these down here?
So we have, throughout the exhibits, we have all sorts of different, what we use for lampstands. This here, there's many examples of these that you find in Canaan. They're like little shrines that would be built, and so they would represent all sorts of different types of creatures or goddesses and things. And then they would offer incense on them, to whatever deity they wanted to. But we're just using them for, obviously, for lampstands.
So these are all based on archaeological finds as
yes.
well.
Yeah, we find them all over the place.
So you did a lot of research before you put these in here. So then we move on to the time of David.
The time of David, yes. And so this represents here, this wall would represent kind of the artistic style of like the palaces that you would find kind of in the area of Canaan and northern up into Syria at that time in the Mediterranean world. And so this is typical art of what you will find of plastered walls in some really nice palaces at that time. And so we wanted to represent that, saying, here's David. He starts out as a shepherd, but then he moves up into a status as king. And this is type of architecture that he probably would have been familiar with.
He would have been familiar with that.
Yeah.
And I notice here these lamps are on different sort of stands than the ones over here.
There again, we have a different cultic stand they would use that for either for lamps or also for offering incense and things. So yeah.
So let's go over here. Somebody said they can hear the background music fairly loud, so you can hold your microphone a little closer to your face.
Sorry.
But our videographer is listening through earphones, so she can hear it very well. She can hear what we're doing. So, okay, so then we move on to King Hezekiah.
Yep.
And it's a different sort of pattern again, isn't it?
Yes. So you're getting more of, by Hezekiah's time, you're getting more like Assyrian influence. So again, Mesopotamian influence that's coming into the region because they are conquering the kingdom of Israel at that time. And so Hezekiah, he's between the nation of Egypt and the nation of Assyria, and is kind of trying to keep his nation independent, and that's where you have him with the invasion of the Assyrian king Sennacherib, where the Assyrian army is wiped out by the angel of the Lord because the Assyrian monarch challenges the God of Israel, who Hezekiah submits to and asks for help.
Now, this particular video portrait here has Hezekiah wearing some weird thing on his head.
Yeah.
Do you think that was real?
Yes. Yeah, we know at the time that's the type of helmets that some of them wore. And so that, again, is from the northern area. We have several examples of that type of helmet that they wore.
So again, this is all based on archaeological finds, historical evidence.
Yes, everything is.
And so we go from Hezekiah. There's that helmet there if you want to have a close-up look at that. And actually, these were all filmed, these video portraits, in our warehouse, actually. Made the sets there. And all the clothing we actually made.
We made it
and
all.
All the items were handmade, especially for these video portraits.
Yep, they were.
So then we move on to Daniel.
So yes, Daniel. And so then we're showing more like artwork that you would find, big monumental sculpture that you'd find from the times of the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and then onwards into the Persian era. And so Daniel's kind of in between there, especially with the Babylonians, and then a little bit at the tail end with the Persians when they conquer Babylon. And so this is just representing kind of what you would find once the people are taken away back into the area of Babylon.
And then even looking at the lamps, the stands are on, are even different to the ones at David's time, that are different to the ones in Rahab's time, and so on. So you've researched all these very carefully.
It all changes, these cultures all change.
So as you go around, when people come, and even when you look at down below here, you see this stone, but over here you see the different patterns and colours. What does that represent?
Well, they would use glazed brick. Especially the Babylonians, they used lots of glazed brick because they didn't have as much stone in Mesopotamia. And so it kind of harkens back to like the Tower of Babel. Why did they use brick to build it? Because that's the primary resource that they had. And so you find like Babylon, the city of Babylon, it was a city that was built out of brick for the most part. You have to go elsewhere to find stone. And like in Israel, you have a lot more stone because they have a lot more of it.
See, that's fascinating. Again, I'm just encouraging people, when you come and you walk around through the Biblical Authority Room, you'll now know, stop at each section and look, and you'll see differences. For instance, looking back at Joseph there, you see sort of brick and stone, but that's very different to what we saw in Egypt.
Yes.
So even the bottom parts, even what you put around the bottom there, is very important. It represents that period of history.
Yep.
And so do the paintings. What about the ceilings?
The ceilings, again, they all represent what you find either in palaces at the time or in the area of Joseph and Rahab. That's where you'd find more local architecture of how they made it, like with reed ceilings, different types of beams that they would work.
See, a lot of people wouldn't think to look at the ceilings.
Right.
But and we didn't do this, we should have done that, shouldn't we? But if you start back at where we started and you start looking at the ceilings, like this one, you see a lot of reeds, but up here...
And so this one, the Egyptian one, they would carve into mountainsides to make tombs and all sorts of different architecture, temples sometimes. And so this represents they would hack out a room from solid rock, from the floor all the way to the ceiling, and then you'd have parts that would eventually collapse and fall in. And so a lot of tombs we can't even get into today because they have collapsed.
And so then, as you come around here, we get to the time of Jesus, and things are different again.
Yes. So this is the Hellenistic style. So like the time of Herod the Great, he really brought this into Israel at that time. And so and this represents just a lot of different geometric and floral designs that they would make it look like it was painted wood grain or rock grain, like different types of rock with using different colors. When you're in Israel at that time, the Jews, they interpreted the law that you couldn't represent a human figure or animal figures. So their art is they used a lot of, just like the Romans, lots of paint, lots of color, but they didn't show
figures,
any
like
figures.
we saw in the others.
Yes. And so that's why this is the only area that we just left with just geometrical shapes.
And I see
stuff.
even the stands for the lamps are different again.
Same way. Yep.
So now what about here as we turn around, the mural that we see on the floor?
So this represents a mosaic floor, and that was very, very common in Roman times. I mean, it's just what you find everywhere. And so at the time of Christ, lots of the houses that we know of that are in Jerusalem, they would have had mosaic floors. They wouldn't have had like this. This would be in more of a Greek or Roman pagan house, because it would have a human face on it, so of some god or goddess or mythological character. But in the upper city at Jerusalem, we have all sorts of beautiful architecture, just like the Romans. And the only difference is you don't have idolatrous images. And so otherwise, they have mosaic floors.
The same sort of patterns.
Yeah.
Now, what about the roof here? All the way around, each section looks different.
Yes, and so that again is...
There's even some bird nests up there.
Right, yeah. And so this is supposed to, as you look like at that area, that's Egyptian style there.
Okay.
This would be more like the time of David. Up here, this would be the Greek Herodian Hellenistic style. And then over here on this side is the more Roman, what you'll find at the time of the apostles and after that.
Somebody said, this guy's a historian artist. That's what you are.
Yes, I am.
Historian artist. He said, really neat exhibit, neat to see how it was researched so much. Yeah, I think that's what people need to appreciate. If you just come here and visit, walk through, you don't appreciate it as much as getting a guided tour by someone to explain all the differences. Now when you come, you look at each section. Each section is different.
Yes, it is.
And the artwork and just the way it's portrayed, the architecture, it's all different.
And
so
that's,
you could stand in here and go around and see all the differences here.
Yeah, and that's what we lots of times forget when we think about people that lived at the time of like Abraham and then all the way up to Christ. It's a big period of time that, hundreds of years between them, and culture changes.
Culture changes, and different cultures develop. And so
they're conquered, they're moving different places.
So there are different sorts of artists and sculptors and their religious beliefs, and it all influences it all, and so it goes on. So now as we come here, this is a different floor. What is this one?
Yeah, so this is based on Roman architecture.
So over here, we should have looked at that floor there too.
So, there again would be more Herodian in kind of what we're representing there, what you would find in the kingdom of Herod the Great or the later Herodian kings. But over here, this is based on stuff that you'd find more Roman cobble streets and cities. Like if you went to Pompeii, you'd find a lot of stuff like that. And then the architecture, we could show what is more like influenced from the Greek side at that time, the Hellenistic, the Eastern Roman, and then also as we move on, it'll be more the typical Roman of what you'd find more in Italy itself at that time.
So Greg, you know that one of the founders, along with myself and Mark Loy, is Mike Zovath.
Yes.
And Mike is your boss because he looks after all the design studio and all that area, the construction and so on. And okay, I'll show people this. You would miss this. If you look down here very carefully, maybe you could point to it. He signed his name there. Can you see that, Greg? There it is. See the Z? Look at that graffiti.
Yes.
But we let him do it.
Yes.
Right? You guys
Yep.
let him do it.
We can't keep his hands off it when it comes to...
99.99% of people would never know that was there.
That's right. No.
But now I've showed them. There's a secret we've just
Yep.
shown you.
Yeah.
And by the way, somebody else you work with, you know, Neffel Tim, we call him.
Oh, yes.
Tim Chafee.
Yes.
Who looks after all the script writing and that.
Yep.
He said you're doing a good job.
Oh,
so there
good.
you are.
I'm glad. Tim does... Generally, Tim is the one that does this, and he's a great friend.
So, okay, explain the architecture here and what do we
So
have here?
yeah, there again, here with the Roman and the Hellenistic style, they would paint walls to look like they had actual depth to them. So you'd have like doors that would be painted on walls, windows painted on walls, all sorts of different things to give it a sense of depth. They would paint the trim on there. They would do all sorts of different then little paintings in between. And so to just give a layered feeling of depth back into, even though it's just a flat wall. And they would do this in all sorts of different architecture.
And again, I see stands different here
Yep,
with those
yep.
lights on them.
Yep, those are Greek lamp stands.
And so then we come around to this sort of final section here. So what have we got down the end here?
So this is the kind of how we wrap it up of the end of the New Testament. This is kind of what you'd find in Italy, in Rome at that time. That type of architecture. Again, they're making these walls look as though there is all sorts of molding and windows and little areas that are kind of even though this is just a flat wall and it was just painted. And so they did that all the time. And so their type of artwork, very bright and gaudy. You would have felt in some of those rooms with the Romans, you'd have felt that the room was very small and rather oppressive because we are not used to artwork like this at all. I mean, but this is how they would paint all their walls, you know.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And then the ceilings here are
The
different.
ceiling's the same, yep. Whereas, like, again, they would make it look like there was, you know, a opening at the top. They could be extremely ornate in the paint. I mean, it is amazing to see the artwork and the time that it must have gone to paint entire villas, you know, inside and out like this.
So what time frame was this again?
So this would be the time like of the New Testament,
Right.
end of the New Testament, and then the Rome obviously endures for
Yeah,
you know a
quite
few
a
more
while.
100 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I noticed at the time of Christ you have a different ceiling over there too.
Yes, we do. And actually, we're gonna continue adding a little bit here as time goes on.
So yeah, one of the things, even this exhibit, what amazes me is I thought it was finished when you guys finished it in November. Then I come back and I see things added, and then I see some of these stands added. And
Yep.
then I see other things added, and actually, just to show people, we'll let them in on this secret, okay? But if you look over here, there's one particular column there not finished.
It's not.
Now I've seen what's going on there.
Yes.
It's over in the design
It
studio.
is in
it's
the
going
studio.
to be elaborate.
Yes,
It's ornate.
yes, it's going to be beautiful.
But see, that one's not finished yet. and
Nope.
So you finish that, and then you keep
Yep.
adding some other things in here.
Right. That ceiling up there is going to have some panels put up in there. That'll be quite spectacular as we make that area look really neat.
We have
But-
someone watching from Oxford in the UK.
Mhm.
So welcome. So, well, again, hey, Greg, you've shown us. I mean, I've learned some things tonight I didn't know. It's amazing that the artists have done so much research and you know so much of the history.
Yeah.
That is fascinating. So I want
Yeah.
people to understand when they come here and go through these exhibits, it's just not somebody who painted on a wall.
No.
These were carefully researched, designed. Every little section in this Biblical Authority room, this is only one room,
Yes.
one exhibit of this series of new exhibits. Every little section has been so carefully researched and done with such detail. I mean, the attention to detail for the painting, the architecture, for the time period. And, you know, why is it, one more question for you, and that is, why is it when we see a lot of the artifacts in the museums, they're not brightly coloured
Right.
like we see here?
Right.
How do you know they were brightly coloured, a lot of these?
Well, we do have like artifacts when they come out of the ground. They tend to have a lot more color on them, and we have examples of that when they find a statue in certain places, like in Italy or in Greece or wherever. And when we have the accounts of them, when they pull it out of the ground, it has color all over it. But because it's been in the ground for so long, it almost just like you can watch it just disappearing, and it goes away so fast. But then you can go back, and a lot of these statues, even the ones that have been in museums for a long time, and they have different ways that they can test it. And so they can test actually for pigments on the statues, on all sorts of different reliefs, and they can pick up the pigments and find out what colors they are and what designs they were on there. It's really fascinating.
That's one of the things that I didn't realize until all of you were researching this and painting this, and I asked you, how come you're painting this with such bright colors?
Right.
And then I find out that, hey, that's how they used to be.
Right.
In fact, I was over in England not long ago, and was there in Oxford. Went to one of the museums there, and they have a statue of this Roman soldier, the one that they found. Then they have another one that they've made showing you what it would have been like,
Right.
and it's brightly coloured.
Yeah.
And the other one just looks white.
Yeah.
When you look closely, you can see a little bit of pigmentation here and there, but
Yeah.
so you made sure you represented this as it would have
Yes.
been at the time.
Yeah, yep. Basically, think of the ancient world, the way they thought of things. If it wasn't painted, then it wasn't finished. I mean, we know that even in Rome, beautiful marble, they painted it. And so if we have imitate Roman architecture, Roman and Greek architecture all over the world, like our Capitol building, has all sorts of Greek columns, and, if it would have been Greek or Roman, it would have been gaudily painted on the entire outside.
Is that right?
Yeah, it wouldn't just be plain, no.
Now, would that be true going back to Egypt and
Yeah.
Canaan and Egypt and so on?
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, this has really been fascinating. This has been intriguing, and people have commented here. They really love it, and somebody said ARG takes great care with authenticity, and we do.
We try to.
You want to make this as authentic as possible.
Yeah.
I've been to museums around the world, and to be honest, I can't remember seeing something done like this to exhibit these
Right.
particular cultures in this way. I've never seen that anywhere.
Right.
I think this is absolutely outstanding. I think it rivals anything you see anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And thank you for being one of the team. I know there's others that you work with that are part of the team.
We have a really
So we
talented
have a really
team.
talented team and dedicated team.
Yes.
And just ask everyone to pray for us, because right now, because people can't come to the Creation Museum or the Ark Encounter, we don't have that income. And so it's a struggle for us. It's a struggle for our staff. And we're really in need of people to pray for us. And you can help support us. We'll put the link in there. Go to the donate page, and any little bit is not too small.
Right.
A lot of people who can give a small bit, actually it adds up to a lot.
Yes, it does.
So we just wanted to say thank you for being here. And I do a behind-the-scenes tour each weeknight, and we have a special program on Saturdays and Sundays at 7 p.m. with Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, looking at his history and genetics, history and population. But we give them some behind-the-scenes tours Monday to Friday while the Creation Museum is closed and the Ark is closed. So we're bringing it to you, and not only do you get to get a glimpse of it all, but you get some behind-the-scenes information. They have had some great teaching tonight. That's like a history lesson. You need to show it to your kids and give them a history lesson. That was a history lesson tonight. It really was. It's sort of a history survey through the cultures of the Bible, right?
Yep. Yep.
So, Greg, thanks for doing that
You're
for us. And join us again tomorrow night at 7 p.m.